Hi, and welcome to another devotional. Glad you're with me today. We're going to be in Acts chapter 13, verses 38 through 41. And today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to read scripture, but then I'm going to give you the context and then read the scripture again. I'm doing this because I'm hoping that this comes across in such a way where you read it, okay, but then when I read it again, giving you the full context of what's going on, you see just how important context is. It brings scripture alive. It helps you understand what's going on and actually how serious this was that Paul is here giving this kind of sermon in the midst of a synagogue. So we're going to start. I'm just going to read scripture. It's Acts 13, verse 38. It says, "Let it be known to you, therefore, brothers, that through this man forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And by him, everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, lest what is said in the prophets should come about. Look, you scoffers, be astounded and perish, for I am doing a work in your days, a work that you will not believe, even if one tells it to you." Okay, so great. That's the scripture. What's going on? So we're going to start in the beginning of Acts 13. And at this point, Paul and Barnabas had come to Antioch in Pisidia. Now, this is different. It's not the Antioch in Syria. That Antioch was the first Gentile church. But Paul and Barnabas, they've come to Antioch in Pisidia. They're sitting down in a synagogue on the Sabbath, and they're about ready to enjoy service. Now, a lot of us may not necessarily know what a service consisted of in a synagogue back in the Old Testament. So let's walk through real quick what a service looked like. Usually it would start with something called the Shema. Now, this comes from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 5, and eventually, actually, Deuteronomy 11 and Numbers 15 were incorporated into it, but it's a daily prayer that they would recite. It's a kind of equivalent to the modern day tradition of the Lord's Prayer. And then they would have another corporate prayer called the Amidah. And then there would be reading from the Torah, which is the first 5 books in the Old Testament, the 5 books that Moses wrote. And then there was reading from something called the Haftarah, which is reading from the prophets in the Old Testament. And then last, there would be like a short lesson or a sermon. So this is kind of the context of what a service looked like in the synagogue. And in Acts 13:15, this is what it says. Now, mind you, Paul and Barnabas are in the synagogue. They're enjoying the service. And it says, after the reading from the law and prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent a message to them, Paul and Barnabas, saying, "Brothers, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, say it." Now, the rulers at this point, they have no clue what they're in store for. Like, they're thinking that Paul's going to come up and give a great word of encouragement, do some teaching. But Paul's word of exhortation, his word of encouragement at this point, is actually going to divide the audience. Because what does Paul do? He gets up and he starts to preach the gospel. And he starts from the beginning. He starts with God delivering the Israelites out of Egypt. And he goes through the life of Jesus, through the death, the burial, the resurrection. And he's talking about Jesus. And this is where we get to verse 38, right? So now you understand the context. He's in a synagogue preaching in such a way that people are probably not going to be too happy. He says, "Let it be known to you, therefore, brothers, that through this man, Jesus, forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And by him, everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, lest what is said in the prophets should come about. Look, you scoffers, be astounded and perish, for I am doing a work in your days, a work that you will not believe, even if one tells it to you." So, Paul's words afflict those who are comfortable in their practice of Judaism and their traditions. His words were afflicting them because they liked their traditions. But Paul's words comforted those who were afflicted by his words because he preached the gospel and the gospel pierced hearts. There were people who heard the gospel and were comforted by the fact that there was salvation to be found in Jesus. Now, I want you to just imagine the amount of courage it took Paul to get up and do this. He's getting up and he's getting ready to preach a message that he knows is going to be divisive and there's going to be a lot of people unhappy. But he got up and he did it anyway because he was being obedient and his passion in his heart was the gospel. And that outweighed any kind of concern or trepidation you would have in actually preaching to the synagogue. So what can we take out of this? How are you being bold for the gospel? I look at Paul there and I see such boldness. I want to encourage you, be bold as you proclaim the gospel and have you had opportunities. We've talked about this in previous devotions. Are you praying and asking God to give you opportunities to share the hope that you have? be prepared too when you do have that opportunity, because God will bring it. How are you going to share the gospel? But like Paul, be bold as you do so. So God bless. Hope you have a wonderful day and see you soon.